teach. Something different than the BBC will tell you.
Yes.
They will tell you something different that Channel 4 News will tell you.
Fake news.
Or the Guardian paper. And 65 Christians were butchered in cold blood by Islamists. The figure has now gone up to 207.
7 churches just got blown up.
7 churches. 207 martyrs. Are you going to hear the BBC now lecture you for the next week?
No.
About the evils of Christophobia? No. It'll be in the news today, and then it will be forgotten tomorrow.
Yes.
And I want to say, brothers and sisters in Christ, it's your fault. You are the ones to blame, because you have got used to accepting the death of our brothers and sisters like it's a morning routine. You need to stand up for yourselves, grow some balls, and challenge the liberal media, challenge the liberal establishment, challenge the government, the police, the civil service, challenge your weak, effeminate, cowardly leaders in the church. You should have enough. We cannot call ourselves Christians if we do not stand up for those in our own family. And as Christians, we are one family. Who can stand here and if their family was being attacked, they would stand by and do nothing?
No.
Who would do that? Who would do that? Is where your political activism deserves to go. Think outside of the liberal narrative.
Yes, brother.
Think, 1 second, bro. 1 second. Think outside of the liberal rule book. Think differently. It is not enough to simply say this is terrible. What does it profit you if you see your brother in need and having the means to help him, you say, God bless and God be with you? Faith without works is dead. So stand in Christian unity, stand for persecuted Christians, and if that upsets the liberals, so be it.
Yes.
If that upsets Western Europe and America and their interests, and Russia and their interests, so be it.
Yes, brother.
Stand up against the Islamists.
Excuse me, brother.
Yes,
Can I
sir.
just ask one? You know, that it always confuses me, and I agree with nearly everything you say. But in Romans chapter 13, verse 1, it says this: let everyone be in subjection to the superior authorities, for there is no authority except by God. The existing authorities stand placed in their relative positions by God.
Yes.
So, if the authorities are put there in the position of God, how come you're telling us?
So
to
let
go?
me answer.
I'm
that.
just,
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's
I'm
a
not-
fair question.
I'm just
It's a
asking
fair
a
question, bro. It's a fair question. So, to repeat the question, Christians are commanded in the book of Romans to submit themselves to civil authority. This is true.
So we can't then.
No, you're wrong. However, Christians need only submit to civil authority in those things that are godly. And therefore, when the state says to us, we should not do anything about our persecuted brothers and sisters, that we shouldn't be worked up about it, that we shouldn't stand with them in their struggle, we can ignore the state, because the state is contradicting the faith. And a scriptural example of that is found in... I want to talk about Notre-Dame Cathedral. But ladies and gentlemen, my voice is failing me, so if you want to hear me, I'm going to invite you to move a little closer, because I'm going to stop projecting my voice. So if you want to hear me and you can't, move closer. So, let's just talk about Notre-Dame Cathedral. Donald Tusk, in response to the destruction of Notre-Dame Cathedral, said that it reminds us as Europeans that we are united by something more than treaties. That's what he said. It is a tragedy. Sicinius, under the Emperor Decius, was against St. Denis. And then the 250 Christians that he first converted. St. Denis and his two companions were seized and martyred in Paris. Shortly after his death, he was venerated by Christians as a saint and martyr. A pious matron named Catulla led the erection of a shrine over the burial site. So Christians have been in Paris for over a millennia. In October the 12th, 1160, Maurice de Sully was raised to be the Bishop of Paris and proposed the construction of a cathedral dedicated to our mother, the Virgin Mary. In 1163, the first stone was laid in the presence of King Louis VII and Pope Alexander III. There were 4 phases of construction. The first was between 1163 and 1182. The second between 1190 and 1225. And the third between 1225 and 1250. Now, brothers and sisters, it takes an entirely different worldview for a builder to lay a stone to a building that he will never see completed. Because that is how our European ancestors thought. They had a vision enlarged by eternity. And so they put the seeds in the ground for things thinking about the future. Whereas today, in our atheistic society, we can't think beyond the next parliament. Think about that. Now, entombed in this great cathedral were a number of icons and relics treasured by Christians. Amongst them, it is alleged, was the icon of the crown of thorns that had, it is said, thorns of the crown of thorns that was placed on Christ's head and was brought to Notre-Dame after the French Revolution, deposited in Notre-Dame. That relic moved from a house in Jerusalem to Constantinople, was smuggled out of Constantinople in 1063, was given by the Venetians to the Parisians, because France was called the oldest daughter of the church and its earliest defender. But other relics include the tunic worn by King St. Louis IX of France, who himself led a noble crusade to help persecuted Christians. There's 3 famous rose-stained glass windows designed to flood the dark building with light, because at the time of the construction of Notre-Dame, the church had developed a new form of architecture called Gothic that was not mocked by Enlightenment philosophers, but who the founder of the European Union, when it said that I feel most European when I enter into a cathedral. The cathedral bells are 10 in number, each with their own name. The bourdon, which is the heaviest bell, is called Emmanuel, which is tuned to F sharp. Emmanuel brings out the times of sorrow and drama to unite the believers in Paris at the Notre-Dame Cathedral. The Gothic cathedral was covered in sculptures illustrating biblical stories for the vast majority of parishioners who were themselves illiterate and used the images to pass down the biblical stories in an oral tradition aided by visual memoir. The sculpture of the right portal shows the coronation of the Virgin Mary, a particular Catholic doctrine. There is a statue of the martyr Saint Denis holding his head over the portal of the Virgin, as well as the Archangel Michael and Satan weighing souls during the Last Judgment. The South Rose has 94 medallions arranged in 4 intricate circles depicting scenes from the life of Christ. The inner circle has 12 medallions showing the 12 apostles. The next 2 circles depict celebrated martyrs and virgins. The 4th circle shows 20 angels as well as saints important to Paris, notably Saint Denis, Saint Margaret, and the Virgin with a dragon, and Saint Eustace. The 3rd and 4th circles also have some depictions of Old Testament subjects. The 3rd circle has some medallions with scenes from the New Testament Gospel of Matthew, which date from the last quarter of the 12th century. The pipe organ itself in Notre-Dame is the 27th largest pipe organ in the world, containing 8,000 pipes operated by 153 stops. Inside, along with the tunic belonging to St. Louis of France, we have 400-year-old paintings, gold, silver and gem-studded chalices, candelabras and many other artifacts from the medieval period. Quite simply, the Notre-Dame Cathedral is a treasure of European history, a treasure of European culture. And the fact that it takes its destruction to remind an imbecile like Donald Tusk that we are united by more than simply treaties, EU treaties in Europe, is surely a sad rebuke to the whole project of the European Union and the idea of a secular European federal state. We Christians had a sense of European culture long before the European Union. Every Christian could go from Greece or Hungary to Scandinavia or Ireland and encounter something he understood in terms of values and culture and art because of our Christian heritage. And when we, as Europeans, abandon our Christian heritage, we abandon the very thing that makes us European. We abandon the very thing that gives us our identity. And we aren't going to recover it through treaties. We aren't going to recover it through some civil identity. We're going to recover it by returning to a muscular Christian faith that inspired our ancestors to defend that identity with their lives, with their riches, with their resources, to embellish the European continent with treasures like the Notre-Dame Cathedral, to fill it with art that speaks of a civilization inspired by the eternal and the beautiful and the noble, that inspired builders to lay stones to a building that they would never, ever enjoy because they had a sense of identity that they were betrothing to their children. They built Notre-Dame in the sure confidence that the future generations would enjoy the building, like they are still building the Cathedral of Sagrada Familia, designed by Gaudi in Barcelona. They are building because they believe in a future, and a secular atheist worldview provides us with no future because it disconnects us from our past. And a people with no sense of their history and no sense of their heritage have nothing to stand for, nothing to believe in, nothing to fight for. And that is why our secular Western liberal states are happy to see our culture washed away, whitewashed, discredited, taken from us. As Christians, it is ours, and we will not surrender it to anyone. Not to you, Donald Tusk, not to you, Theresa May, not to you, Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
It does not belong to you. It belongs to the church, and it is not yours to do with what you want. And it is wrong of you bishops to surrender that heritage to people who do not believe in it. And to you, The ethno-nationalists.
Yes.
You nationalists who want to treat Christianity like some sprinkling on ice cream, like a decorative garnish. You have no claim to the Christian heritage of Europe. You have no claim to my heritage. The Christians of Ethiopia, Nigeria, Pakistan and Egypt have more claim to Notre-Dame than you do. If you separate Christian heritage and European heritage like they are separate, you are not a defender of Christian civilization. You are an abuser of Christian civilization. And I say to you Islamists, you who would seek to take away our Christian identity, we say no. Over my dead body, over my martyred blood, before I would surrender it to you, before I would surrender the cathedral in Alexandria to your abusers, or the churches in Kosovo, or the churches in Lebanon, or the churches in Pakistan. We as Christians are one body, one blood, because we are born in one spirit by one baptism. That is a Christian narrative, better than what the secularists offer you, better than the false ecumenism of weak bishops offer to you, better than what the multicultural relativists offer you. If you can't stand proud on your Christian identity, then give it up. Any questions? Before I move on.
You're going to get annoyed with me.
No,
You know
of course
when in Matthew chapter 28, he's talking about someone like you. In verses 19 and 20.
What does he say?
He says, what Jesus told everyone to do. He says, go therefore and make disciples of the people and of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things I have commanded you, and look, I am with you all the days. So he's you know, because Jesus was a mild and loving teacher, wasn't he? Yeah?
Christ, so let me...
Please.
Go on, bro.
So when like a teacher like yourself, you've got to adopt the personality of Christ. That's what you've got to do, you know, and you would agree with that, yeah? So that adoption of Christ, you can imagine Christ. Christ is going to be a loving teacher. Do you know what I mean? You've got to win hearts.
Let me just,
haven't got to,
brother. Let me just deal with this point.
You win hearts.
Okay, let me just deal with this point, because in terms of evangelism, the brother is right. As Christians, we must stand and love our neighbour as we love ourselves.
That's the second commandment.
We as Christians are called also to love our brothers and sisters. On the night that Christ was betrayed, he took a cloth around his waist, he knelt before his disciples and he washed their feet. And he said to them, "This day I give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you." Now, if that commandment is a facsimilation, identifiable to the commandment to love our neighbour, why is it new? Because that commandment's in the Old Testament. There's nothing new about that. The thing that makes it new is that Christ is speaking about the new covenant community. He's talking about the special love that Christians owe to one another because they belong as a family, as a people in the new covenant community, as part of the kingdom of God. Now, that love means that when we see our brothers and sisters being discriminated, as we do in Egypt, as we do in Pakistan, as we do in North Sudan, as we do in South Sudan, as we do in Central Africa, as we do in Nigeria, as we do in Kosovo, as we do in Lebanon, as we do in Syria, as we do in Jordan, as we do in Saudi Arabia, as we do in Qatar, as we do in Kuwait, as we do in Afghanistan, as we do in Burma, as we do in North Korea, as we do in Sri Lanka, as we do in China. We owe, because of love, to stand with them. The saints, I'll find him for you. There was a church father who was challenged by Muslims in the 7th century, John of Damascus. He lived in a land conquered by Muslims, and they challenged him to debate. And he said, "Oh, you Christians, you're commanded to love your enemies. But when we see your practice, what we see, you Christians," speaking of the Christians of the 7th century, the Muslims said, "they sharpen their swords and they go to war." John Damascus replied to them, "Tell me, who is better, the man who keeps some of the commandments or the man that keeps all of the commandments?" And his Muslim interlocutor said, "He who keeps them all." And John of Damascus replied, "So then, as Christians, we are commanded to turn the other cheek at personal offence, at assault upon the individual. But we are commanded to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. So, when we see our brothers and sisters die, we sharpen our swords and we go to war." This was how John Damascus replied to his Muslim interlocutors. The church in the West has been neutered. It's lost its balls. They've been cut off by the Enlightenment, and we are led by cowering bishops who are more concerned with appeasing the liberal establishment than they are in standing in solidarity with our persecuted brethren in all the nations that I have just said.
Didn't Jesus say to Peter, if you put away that sword, he said to him, put away that sword, those who live by the sword are going to die by that
Which
sword.
is a fact, and it's a fact that we see. One second.
When you die for your brother, what they meant was this. Say like if we're being persecuted, you're being persecuted, I know where you are, say for instance, and these Muslims are going to kill me, kill you. I will gladly die for your sake.
Let me ask you this question.
It doesn't mean that you
Brother, let me ask you this
stab and
question.
kill someone.
Do you love your mother?
Who?
Do you love your mother?
Of course I do.
If someone was trying to rape your mother, would you stop them? Answer the question.
That's not what Jesus said.
Answer the question.
Now you're going around in...
Would you stop the person raping your mother? Yes or no?
No, what? I can't call it.
You camcorded it.
Of course I would.
You're sick.
You know what I mean?
Would you?
Would.
What would you do to stop them?
Hey? What everyone else would do.
Do a thought experiment with me. Stop being evasive. Answer the question.
I would.
Your mother is being raped.
Everything I could do to stop it.
Would you use violence? Would you use violence?
I would, but I mean...
There you go. And this is the point, ladies and gentlemen. This is the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Christians in the West have cognitive dissonance. We are suffering from poor teaching. We accept that we are called to love one another as a family, and we accept that the reasonable thing to do is to defend our family if they are subject to violence. But then, when we apply that logic to our brothers and sisters who are being persecuted in other lands, the cognitive dissonance kicks in. And we want instead to talk about platitudes that make us feel holy and virtuous here in the West and do nothing to solve the problem? Nothing. Brother, let me ask you another question. Do a thought experiment with me. You come home one day to your house. You hear screams from your neighbor's house. Someone shouting for help. Like a good Christian, you're running there to help them. And you see that someone is burgling them and attacking them with a bat. What would you do?
I'll try and restrain them.
You'd use violence.
I just said.
Is that violence?
I said I will try my best to restrain them.
You'd use violence. That's what violence is. So, here he is saying that I would defend my neighbour.
I'm not saying it. I'm saying what the Bible says.
Do you believe in the Bible?
Of course.
Are you commanded to love your neighbour?
Oh, absolutely.
Would you defending your neighbour by restraining the robber be an expression of love?
Is my Muslim my
Answer
neighbour?
the question.
Yes.
It is.
Is
Right.
a
No,
Muslim
one
your brother?
second.
Is a Muslim your brother?
Yes, he is. So let me deal with that. But notice the cognitive dissonance. He said that loving my neighbour meant restraining the robber. But when we talk about restraining the Islamists that are killing our brothers and sisters, he doesn't want to love his brothers and sisters.
Of course I love them.
So, what do you do with the Islamists? You have to stop them.
So what? Pick up arms? Is that what you're saying? And attack them? Is that what you're saying?
Are you saying if those...
I'm asking you.
I'm going to deal with a question.
You answered the question.
I'm going to
I
deal with
answered
a
your
question.
You've
I'm
got-
going to deal...
Wait, answer it
Firstly,
straight now.
let's deal with the question about all the Muslims are brothers. Yes, in humanity, but they are not brothers in Christ. And we owe to every human being, regardless of their faith, a duty of love because they are our neighbour. But if our neighbour is committed to injustice, they are committed to doing evil, it is not love to do nothing to stop them. And as Christians, we owe a special love to our family in Christ, to our Christian brothers and sisters.
Does that mean to go to war with them? This is
That
what
goes above our duty to our neighbours. So when two loves conflict, the love that we owe is to our own family first. The scriptures say, do good to all whilst you have opportunity. In other words, if you can, do good to all. But what good can you do to a jihadist with a suicide belt going to a church to kill innocent people? It then goes on to say, but especially those in the house of faith, to our Christian brothers and sisters. So to answer his next question,
Yes, go on, please.
does it mean going to war?
Does it mean going to war?
Absolutely. The way to stop ISIS.
Wow.
The way to stop ISIS.
Don't blame terrorists for Islam.
The way to stop ISIS.
You're blaming terrorists for Islam.
The way to stop ISIS was through force.
Talking rubbish, man.
Because these people were committed to living by the sword.
Yeah?
And so
you want
they
war?
needed to die by
Okay, take
the
your
sword.
sword.
I
Take
get
your sword
that.
and
So-
fight them, innit?
Stop. I get
So,
that. I get
as
that.
Christians,
I get that. No, I get that.
as
I
Christians,
get that point. I get that point. But what
One
I
second.
get that point.
What
But
about
what
the
you're
Irish
saying?
terrorists? Are they
Please
Muslim?
stop.
wait, 1 second.
What
One
about
second.
Time, please.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask him that question. So, as Christians, what can we do? We can pressure our governments.
That's on the floor. You can't pick up.
We can pressure our governments to establish in the Middle East a separate, independent Christian country for Christians.
Yes.
We can pressure our governments to establish for Christians an independent Christian country in Southeast Asia. where those Christians can be safe and depend on themselves for their own security.
How do we convert?
Because their own governments have failed them. Now let me ask you a question. You virtue signaller, tell me, how do you propose to stop ISIS?
I didn't say I didn't agree with you on that.
who's
But what
ISIS
you're
first?
trying to say, there's 1.5 billion Muslims. You're talking about Islam as a
They're not all ISIS.
Right, okay then.
Not every Muslim supports ISIS.
Right, but you're
We're
talking.
talking about stopping ISIS.
But we're not there
So
to.
learn to be discreet.
Yeah, you're not to be preaching war. You're not them and
Stop
us.
ISIS.
Let's be clear what I preached. Let's be clear
Christ.
what I
That's not
preached.
from Christ.
One second, sister. Let me reply to his point.
That's not
Because he
from Christ.
didn't actually answer my question.
No.
Again, notice, he didn't actually say how he proposes to stop ISIS. So let me ask him again, and maybe he can give a clear
Who
answer.
made ISIS? That's the first question.
How do you propose
stopped.
to stop
Who made
ISIS?
They've been stopped already.
Who made
by war.
ISIS?
How do you propose to stop them?
They've been stopped by
ISIS
war.
Stop equivocating. How do you propose to stop ISIS?
They've been stopped by war.
How do you
I leave
propose?
everything to God.
Notice,
I
I
leave
leave
everything
everything to God.
Well, that's what I do.
This is the kind. This is the kind. This is the kind of pathetic spirituality that has been taught in Western churches.
So
Sister, you had a point.
You're the speaker.
Wait, jump in. I'm first.
For a couple of questions that you asked, you gave an example of what would you do if someone was beating your father or your mother. As a Christian, because I'm a born-again believer, I committed my life to Christ because of God. My response would be to actually take the beating for that person.
So,
It's
thank you.
sacrificial,
So the
sacrificial
sister,
love.
the Christian sister, has proposed an alternative theory to my thought experiment. She goes home, she sees her neighbour's door is broken open, she hears the screams for help, and then she would run in there and take the beating herself because it's sacrificial. So when the robber has finished beating her to death, he just goes back to beating the victim. This kind of irrational thinking is poisoning the ability of the church to act upon our Christian teachings.
It seems
One
to me
second,
that you're
sister.
preaching at
One second.
alt-right sort
One
of
second.
Christianity. That's how it seems to me.
Let us be clear what I am saying. Am I saying that you should pick up a club and take action yourselves? No, I am not saying that. But what I am saying is that we as Christians, one, should actually start thinking like intelligent people and not the stupidest people in Europe, and think about these questions intelligently. Two, that we should become activists for the persecuted church and press our governments for a political solution.
How many countries
One
did you name?
second.
How many countries did you
One
name?
second.
Should we go to war with
One
all of them?
second.
Korea, every
One
single one of them.
second.
Should we go to war with... There was
We
about 30, 40
should
countries.
press our governments to find a political solution that addresses the problem. And that involves establishing an independent Christian state in the Middle East, like we established Israel in the Middle East. Like, one second, like the international community established Kosovo in Europe, like they established South Sudan in Africa. It has been done recently, it can be done again. And if that means international intervention that leads to war, then yes, we should advocate that. That is what we should do, because legally we can do it.
So you say
I'm
as a
calling
safety...
you to legal activism.
So as a safety, all these persecuted Christians, you say they should have their own state.
Yes.
Oh well, I can't.
You can't advocate
I agree
war
with that
as a
myself.
Christian.
And would you advocate for it?
Yes, I would, but not go to war. But I'd advocate
So if
for
the
that.
surrounding
to keep them
countries,
safe, yes.
like Syria, is a rubble right now. It's a failed state. The international community could help to end the civil war by giving some land to the Sunnis, some land to the Alawites, and some land to the Christians. That would help end the war, and it would help persecuted Christians. But Christians, you lack imagination because your leaders are cowards.
How do we? Hold on.
imagination.
How
Let
do
the
we?
sister
How do
speak.
we
Let
get
the
them back?
sister speak.
First of all, you just twisted my words just there. You completely put your own interpretation on it. When I meant sacrificial love, I didn't then go on to say that the person would then continue beating.
Oh, you'd stop
and
them.
whatever.
How would you stop them?
Pardon?
would stop them?
Have you heard of Nicky Cruz?
No, don't give me an example. We're talking about the thought experiment.
Okay.
You're getting beaten to death by the robber who was beating to death your neighbour, and now you're saying you're going to take that beating for yourself.
Yes, I would.
So how does that stop them? When they
I
finish
would do.
beating you to a pulp,
I
how
would
does
do.
that stop
You know
them
what I would
beating
do?
your neighbour? Go on.
Well, you know what I would do?
Go on.
I would get back up and I would look them in the eye and I would tell them that God loves them, that I love them.
Have you ever been hit by a baseball bat?
No, I haven't.
Trust me, you won't be getting back up.
Well, I would certainly try to.
you
I
know
would
the
won't
certainly
be getting
try
You
to.
know
back
the
up.
separate states,
And
yeah?
That, brothers.
You know the separate states.
No, one second.
How do we go there?
Let me
to
know.
make
One
baptize?
second.
How
Let
do we
me
baptize?
The point is that what disturbs me as a Christian is that you're preaching violence. As a believer,
No, I preach political activism. Now you're twisting my words.
So how would we-
Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I apologise.
How would we go
What
make-
I believe in is preaching the gospel because I do believe that whatever the source is, because our battle isn't against flesh. Our battle is against principalities.
Right, so let me
evil.
deal with this
Hang on,
sister's
please,
point.
Let me finish.
No, let me deal with this sister's point.
Give me the
You're
courtesy.
talking, because you're moving on to
Because I
something
haven't-
else.
I'm not. I'm
You're
trying to finish the
talking
point.
about something else.
I'm trying to finish the
Right,
point.
well, finish then.
Thank you very much. It's very gracious of you. I would preach the gospel because I do believe.
So
that
when
the
he's
gospel,
beating you to death, you're going to
Pardon?
preach the gospel to him, right?
I would definitely try by my actions.
Yeah.
By my
Just-
actions.
right,
to
ladies
demonstrate
and
the
gentlemen,
Lord Jesus.
here you have a thought experiment, and I invite you to think it through for yourselves. You have two possible courses of action.
No, there's more than
Right,
two.
the sisters is this. I run into the house, and then I preach the gospel to the man beating me to death with a baseball bat. And when he knocks me down, I try to get back up. Or you try to take the baseball bat off the robber, and if you have to knock him out to do so, you punch him in the face. Which do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Option A, the ladies, the sisters, or option B, mine? Put your hand up. I'm asking them, not you. I'm asking them, not you. Put your hand up if you think the sisters will actually work. No, one person, two people. Now put your hand up if you think that my solution might actually work. Most people. Do you know why? Do you know why? Because we are supposed, as Christians, to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. So think about what it means to love your brothers and sisters in their situation.
You know, with this separate state that you was talking about, when they get the Christians,
Yeah.
that you want them to get. How then, if all the other states are Muslim, Buddhist, and all this, when Jesus says go therefore and baptise, how would you do that then? If there's no Christians there,
So,
to
I get the point.
convert everyone
I get the
to
point.
Christian?
Preach the gospel.
So let me
How does that happen?
let me just address this brother's point, because the brother's point is, if we set up an independent Christian state in the Middle East where Christians can be safe from persecution, how then do we preach the gospel to Muslims? I'll address that point very simply. We send missionaries. We preach the gospel through social media. We preach the gospel. And if you had a place where there was a Christian state in the Middle East, they could set up their broadcasting technology to suit the agenda of the gospel, and the surrounding Muslim states could do nothing about it. They could be a base for Christian missionaries to work from and to go to. They would be a base for Christian converts to find refuge. That, it doesn't stop or contradict the idea of preaching the gospel.
Yes, it does.
On C.O.E. films, you're just ignorant, look. On C.O.E. films, I am stood in London, in Hyde Park, and I am preaching the gospel to thousands of viewers in Saudi Arabia. You don't need to be in the country, though of course you can, you should, and it helps. No, there are Christians who would like to think that somehow having a political state is contradictory to preaching the gospel. Like this sister here.
Don't presume to know
She
me.
doesn't think logically.
I do think very
She
logically.
seems to think that having a Christian state contradicts the idea of preaching the gospel. And yet, the two things do not contradict one another, nor exclude one another, nor prohibit one another in any practical sense. Now, she accused me, quite wrongfully,
I feel very
of
sorry
preaching
for
violence.
I feel
Do you
very
know
sorry.
why the Christian sister did that? Because the Christian sister has been informed by liberal society
By the Bible.
to have certain categories of thought.
The Bible.
And when someone comes along and talks about having a political vision to help persecuted Christians, which is all that I have done, and standing in solidarity with persecuted Christians, which is all that I have done, and which is completely biblical, because she has been raised on an effeminate, cowardly faith,
Excuse me.
she has no box
Excuse you.
in which to put it in.
Excuse you.
So the box that she puts it in is you're teaching violence. That is the only box that she has.
Excuse you.
So tell me,
Excuse you.
why did you accuse me of preaching
Excuse you.
violence?
Excuse
Why did you say that?
Excuse you. You do not know me. You do not what you don't know what doctrine I've been raised
Tell me,
on.
why did you accuse me of preaching
If I have
violence?
accused you, then
That is exactly what you did.
Excuse me. If
Why
I
did
have,
you do it?
Excuse me. Can I finish?
Tell me why you did
Can I
it.
finish?
If you answer my question.
Can I finish?
If you answer my question.
If I did, I'm very sorry because that was not my intention.
That is not
That-
the
that
question.
is not my
The
intention.
question
And
is
so
why
and so
did you do
I'm
it?
asking-
I accept your apology.
Thank you,
Now
thank
answer
you,
the question
thank
I
you,
actually
thank
asked,
you,
which is
thank
why
you,
did you
thank
do it?
If I did, then I...
No, not if you did, you did.
If I
No, you did.
That wasn't my interpretation. That wasn't my... that
Why
wasn't my-
did you do it?
that
Okay,
wasn't
she's
my
not answering the
intention.
question.
That wasn't my intention. Is this just for the camera?
You're not answering the question. The question I asked you was why, not if.
No, and I'm saying... that
So I'll
wasn't
give you
my
another chance.
intention.
Oh.
That wasn't my intention.
We're not asking about
That
your
wasn't my
intentions.
intention.
You
Because-
did do it.
No,
I'm asking
no,
you why you
because
did it.
Okay,
Bob, let's focus,
All
let's focus.
Okay.
Sorry, that wasn't my intention.
Okay, sister, you can't answer the question. Maybe we'll speak off camera.
It doesn't seem very...
I gave you the opportunity to answer the question, sister. You didn't want to.
Okay.
Christians, you need a bigger political vision. You need a political vision that actually answers the question about what we do for persecuted Christians. It isn't the answer that is given by the secular state. The idea of talking about religious freedom is not addressing the problem. By the time that they get the change that they're asking for, the Christian church in the Middle East will be wiped out. We need an answer now that's effective to the problem now.
Does the Bible say that religion's going to be wiped out?
One
anyway?
second. Let me
It does
do this.
say that, doesn't it?
We'll come back to you, bro. So, what should we do? Not preach violence, as the sister wrongly accused me of, but by having a bigger vision. of what Christian solidarity means, of advocating something outside of what is the political narrative of the liberal secular state, and calling upon the international community to establish, by whatever means are necessary, a Christian state in the Middle East. And with that final thought and correction, I say God bless you before I move on to my next topic. Any questions?
Yeah, when she said about the baseball ban, it's like when a person comes in the house with a baseball ban, you could pray and maybe there might be interventions.
Maybe there might be, or maybe there might not be. And that's the problem, brother, that's the problem with how Christians are thinking about these issues. They are thinking about them illogically. There may be, there may not be. Do something real for your neighbour. Stop doing those things that make you feel good about being a Christian, and do those real things that might actually address the issue.
Right, so right there, straight from that aspect there, we've got
Absolutely. The brother raises a good point, that we should be challenging our bishops for how ineffective the leaders they are. We should be challenging them. Why are they not speaking more about this? Why are they not leading us out in protest? Why are they not using their influence in government to establish a real solution to these problems, rather than just virtue signalling rhetoric? And the reason why we can have a president of Russia who is Christian, a president of America who is Christian, a prime minister of Britain who is Christian, and it makes absolutely no difference for our persecuted brethren, is because those Christians are not following a Christian political narrative of Christians standing in solidarity with other Christians. They're following a secular, liberal political narrative that does not see religion at all, that takes religion into no consequence unless it fits into a victim narrative, which is why Theresa May, David Cameron, Tony Blair will all talk about Islamophobia, but they will never, ever speak about Christophobia within the Muslim community that led to the deaths of 207 Christians today in Sri Lanka, or the 170 Christians murdered in Nigeria on the same day as the New Zealand massacre. They won't talk about Nisa Hussain, who in the UK Muslims tried to murder for the crime of becoming a Christian. They tried to kill him in Bradford. They beat him with baseball bats and crowbars. But no mention of Christophobia. This is the government that is happy to see a Christian teacher in the UK sacked for simply posting a petition against the transgender education being forced upon Christian children. The media called it prejudice. But the same media didn't go at the Muslim faith when Muslims protested in Birmingham about the exact same issue. So when Christians do it, we're guilty of a thought crime. When Muslims do it, well, it's culture, and we have to respect everyone's culture. Virtue signalling hypocrisy. Free your minds from it. You can ask a question, sister, of course.
Yeah, but I noticed everyone was here. You still had the heart.
I don't know overseas if there are Christians being persecuted in Sri Lanka, completely wrong. And it goes against my religion.
As a male,
unfortunately, people don't follow what they're supposed to do. And that we need to drive home. As we try. There are
good Muslims, good Muslims, good people. As good Muslims, good Christians, bad Christians.
But at the same time, you have these deviant groups like ISIS.
Yeah, they're not real. Ain't Muslim. That's Zionist.
Whatever is necessary to subdue that.
They've burned down not just Shia Muslims, but Sunni Muslim scholars. They've burned down Islamic heritage libraries.
Oh my God.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. If you actually look at it, because you were talking about Christendom being wiped out, I would actually ask people to consider the thought that there are centuries-old churches in Egypt, in Iran, in Pakistan that have been there. Why? Not because it just took apes like ISIS to come and burn them down, but because the religion does not allow for them to be persecuted. So yeah, and also if you look at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it's actually Muslims who hold the keys, because when Saladin conquered Jerusalem, he said, do not attack their places of worship. And in the Quran,
Saladin was a good man.
yes. So in the Quran it says, we have to come to terms. Yes, so this is what I'm doing. We have to come to terms that we have in common with people of the book and speak to them with respect and good nature. So I'm hoping we can have a conversation.
So I'm going to deal with your question, and then I'm going to... I accept your personal testimony. No, please, I didn't interrupt you, don't interrupt me. I accept your personal testimony. You believe that Islam does not teach these things, that it teaches things about finding things in God. I accept that you believe that. And no, one second. I didn't interrupt you, just don't interrupt me. And I am happy to meet with Muslims like you, to stand with Muslims like you against the Islamists. However, it is clear from our experience as Christians, and if you don't believe me, go and speak to Pakistani Christians, go and speak to Egyptian Christians, go and speak to Lebanese Christians, go and speak to Kosovo's Christians, that in 1400 years of our experience as Christians, this is my history, not yours, this is my historical experience, that we Christians have suffered persecution under Islamic law. Now, yes, absolutely. Yes, go and ask the martyrs of Cordoba. Go and ask the martyrs of Cordoba. Because there is a lie that is being spread by the media that when the Muslims aggressively invaded a Christian land called Hispania, Spain, when they violently conquered that land, when they desecrated the tomb of St. James, when they confiscated Christian churches, when they forbade us to walk in our processions, as is our custom, or to build our churches to the height to which we were accustomed. the Muslims imposed laws that made Christians into second-class citizens in their own land. And when the Christians decided that we aren't going to live under Islamic rule, and they fought them for 700 years, the Caliphate in Spain dedicated itself to the suppression of its Christian neighbours. One second. When the Christians inside that caliphate decided, you can kill us, but we're going to preach the gospel, as the martyrs of Cordoba did, they were executed by the Muslims. And because they were Muslims who had converted to Islam, who were inspired by the martyrs of Cordoba, who then returned to the Christian faith, do you know what the Caliph said to the bishops? The Caliph said this: you either stop this yourselves or we wipe you all out. That's your tolerance of Islam Sharia. Now, let me ask you a question. In Islam, say that if anyone leaves the religion of Islam, they should be executed. That's Sahih al-Bukhari. Do you agree with that hadith, yes or no?
Okay, so number one, you're bringing up something that's irrelevant to the day. Why? No, hold on.
Mom, are you going to blame Notre-Dame on the Muslims?
That is true.
No.
That is true in the sense that if there's a proper Islamic state, under the rules of the Islamic state, if there is someone who is proselytizing openly and causing anarchy, it's likened to treason. Then yes, there are three options. Either they're executed, they're given a chance to leave, or they're given a chance to come back to Islam. So that's no different to the old laws of treason. Okay? So if, for example,
No, I get what you're saying. You don't need an
someone
example.
goes and fights ISIS, like this Begum woman, she's not allowed back in, or if she was allowed back in and the death penalty was in place, she would deserve it under
Hold
the
on one
laws of
second.
treason,
Hold on one second.
right?
No,
And
let-
that's treason
may I-
against country.
let me address
so
your
that's
point.
treason against country.
May I
So
address
this-
your point?
So this is treason against country. So we don't have this treason against country, we have treason against religion.
There you go.
Right. So, but there are conditions that come with it. There are conditions
No,
that
hold
come
on a
with
second.
it.
So
Yes.
let's just to be clear.
Just as there are
to be clear,
conditions that come
sister.
with
Just to be
Trump's
clear,
laws.
what you just heard was an attempt to justify killing Christians who leave Islam. That is what you just heard. She said treason against religion. In other words, I remember the question. Remember what I said. Remember what I said. So remember what I said. So here is the sister. Sister, one second. No, I'm going to speak and you're not going to impose yourself over me. Right, so the sister has basically tried to justify the murder of Christians who leave Islam. That is what she has just said. So she came to me at the beginning saying that what we should do is just reach out to one another, find common ground.
Okay.
However, in an Islamic state, if you leave Islam,
Right,
now that
Are you
would
gonna
cause
tell them about
fitna.
the other hadiths?
Now,
Are you
so
gonna tell your
let's
audience
be
about
clear.
the other hadiths?
How
Are you going
have
to be honest?
Muslims practiced
Are you gonna
this
be honest?
through
Or are you gonna be
1400
dishonest
years?
as a Christian? Are you gonna
The
be
church, yes,
dishonest?
sister, of course, you
Are you
will.
gonna be
Yes,
dishonest
I'm going
as a
to let this sister speak. Right, one second. Let me just finish my. As Christians,
Dishonest.
we have a litany
You
of
said you know the
martyrs.
hadiths, so
We
share
have
the hadiths.
lists
Tell your
of
audience.
martyrs
Tell
that
your
you
audience.
can research who have been killed
If you know
by
the hadiths,
Islamic
then you're being
caliphates
dishonest.
for the crime of leaving Islam.
Tell your audience
That is
about
not
the other
dishonesty, that
Tell
is
the audience.
history.
Tell
The
the
reason
audience.
why the sister
My friend.
is embarrassed
No, I'm not embarrassed.
is
I'm
because her
telling you.
faith,
No.
she
Tell
knows.
the audience,
If
be
you
honest.
realize this,
Friend, if
you might decide
be honest.
to stand up against Islamization and Sharia.
You're being
Go on,
dishonest
sister.
as a Christian.
Christian, non-Muslim. However, what's Christian about killing and murdering millions of people in Afghanistan, Syria, Libya? What is Christian about that?
I'll address that.
That is murder.
Can I address your point, sister? Let me address your point. So, let me address the sister's point.
Also bring up
Because what we find is that liberal secular states. Let me answer. This isn't your. If you want to do a talk, go over there, sister. If you want to do a talk, go over there.
I'm curious.
We find this again and again with those Muslims doing dawah here at the corner. They think that this is their park. They think that no one has a right to speak except them. Now, for sure, they can speak. For sure, they can heckle. But notice their behaviour. Now, to address this sister's point, what's Christian about the bombing of Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. But let's be clear.
Let's be quiet for 1 minute.
Let's notice. Notice the Dawah team don't want to let you speak. So in answer to this lady's question, stop being rude, learn some manners.
Yes.
In answer to this lady's question,
You're failing your team, my brother.
sister, if you can try to tune into me, yeah? The countries, the nation states that bombed Iraq, that bombed Afghanistan, that bombed Libya, ostensibly, by the words of their own leaders, are not Christian countries. They define themselves as liberal, secular, pluralist states. It isn't Christians that bombed Afghanistan. It's liberal, secular, pluralists. It isn't Christians that bombed Iraq. It's liberal, secular, pluralists. It isn't Christians who bombed Libya. It's liberal, secular, pluralists. Those were the ones. So you're creating a false equivalence based upon a false understanding of reality.
They're not Christian.
The Muslims that supposedly did do 9/11 and
Supposedly.
various terrorist attacks. Are they really Muslim then, or are they extremists?
Let me.
Just like the people
Yeah, of course.
who bomb the innocent Islamic countries.
So let me ask you this question. I just want a clarification. I want a clarification. Are you stood there saying that it wasn't Islamic terrorists who did 9/11?
I believe that Afghanistan has a lot of very valuable oil.
Answer the question. Afghanistan came after 9/11, not before 9/11. Learn your history. Answer the question. Do you believe? Answer the question. Do you believe that it was Islamists who bombed 9/11? Yes or no?
Funded by the American government.
So Islamists, this is the kind of conspiracy nonsense that is permeating our society. Islamists funded by the United States government
Swear you are right. You are right.
bombed their own country.
You are right. Let me.
That's the kind of logic we're dealing
You are
with.
right. Let me tell you
Can we
something.
honestly take anything else said by such a person
Can
seriously?
I tell you something?
So,
What about
to
Palestinian
answer your
people?
question
What about
directly,
Palestinian people?
I'm answering
What
her
about-
question, not your
what about
question.
Jewish people?
I'll let you speak next.
What about
I'll
Jewish people?
let you speak next. Let me answer her question. Be polite to the lady. So, let's answer her question directly. Do I believe that the Islamists who are carrying out attacks against the Christian faith are truly Muslim? Yes. No. Let me explain why. Let me explain why. Why have I come to this conclusion? Why? Because the media tell me I'm wrong. So let's look at the actions of groups that were accepted as Islamic caliphates.
Come on, show us.
As Islamic caliphates.
Yeah.
Notice he's changing the subject.
Yeah.
So you have the Ottoman Caliphate. The Ottoman Caliphate is widely accepted by Muslims as being genuinely Islamic. Let's do a comparison of the Ottoman Caliphate to ISIS.
How much they paid
Did the Ottoman Caliphate trade in slaves?
How much?
Yes.
How much
Did ISIS trade in slaves? Yes. Did the Ottoman Caliphate invade Christian lands? Yes. Did ISIS invade Christian lands? Yes. Did the Ottoman Caliphate desecrate, confiscate churches? Yes. Did ISIS desecrate and confiscate churches? Yes. Did the Ottoman Caliphate kill Christians for leaving Islam? Yes. Did ISIS kill Christians for leaving Islam? Yes. Did the Ottoman Caliphate impose the jizya tax? Yes. Did ISIS impose the jizya tax? Yes. Did the Ottoman Caliphate suppress Christian customs like processions and evangelism? Yes. Did ISIS suppress Christian culture and customs? Yes. Did the Ottoman Caliphate govern how Christians can build their buildings? Yes. Did ISIS govern Christians how they can build their buildings? Yes. Notice how the Muslims behave in the park. They are embarrassed by the facts of history. This is 1400 years of our history as Christians. Notice, he changes the subject. He talks about the Crusades. Let's deal with the Crusades. The Crusades were a response to 7 centuries of constant Islamic aggression.
That's right.
Before the First Crusade,
Exactly.
Muslims had invaded the following Christian countries. I need a big breath because the list is long.
Relax.
They invaded Christian Jordan, Christian Palestine, Christian Egypt, Christian Algeria, Christian Libya, Christian Morocco, Christian Spain, Christian Sicily, Christian Italy, Christian Turkey, Christian Namibia, Christian Sudan, Christian Hungary, Christian Greece, Christian Portugal. All of these lands were invaded by Muslim armies before the First Crusade. And notice, the Muslim says it was done fairly. Fairly. That's what he said.
1 minute.
We are dealing with a section, a minority of the Muslim community who believe in Islamic supremacism.
1 minute.
They equal about 3%
Shut your mouth.
of 1.2 billion people.
Shut your mouth. 1 minute.
That represents
Shut your mouth.
40 million people.
Shut your mouth. 1 minute.
You have to stand against them. Now, your question, bro.
Okay.
And then I'm going to stop.
What's happened with the Islamic people?
What?
What's happened with the Islamic people? What's going on with the Islamic people?
I'm not quite sure in what way you want to answer that. That's too big a question. What do you mean? Narrow that
I
down.
want to know what you mean.
You're going to knock the camera down.
Bro, you're knocking the camera.
Come over here, man. You're going to knock the camera down.
I heard your question. Just narrow it down for me because I really don't know what you mean. In what
What's going
sense?
on with the Muslim people?
In what sense?
About everything.
Oh, I can't answer that question. Like, he's asking me to give an answer on everything.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah, it's a Muslim people. You talk about Muslim people. What's going on?
Okay, let's talk about radicalism and the persecution of Christians. Just for those of you who are new to the park,
What about Jewish
the
people?
reason,
What about Jewish people?
yes,
What about Jewish people?
Jews also suffered pogroms
Every
under
day.
Islamic rule.
Every day they kill people.
When the Muslims ruled Spain, there was an anti-Jewish
What about
pogrom.
Jewish people? Jewish people. Talk about
They
Jewish
did.
people.
When they
Talk
conquered
about
Spain,
Jewish people.
they killed 5,000
Talk about
Jews.
Jewish people. Talk.
And why did they do it?
Talk about
They
Jewish
did
people.
it
Talk.
because Muslims
No.
in Spain at the
Talk
time
about Jewish people.
were whipped
Talk
up
about Jewish people.
into a frenzy
You scared. You scared.
because
You
they
scared.
didn't want
You scared.
a Jewish
You are
ruler
scared. You are
over them.
scared. You are scared.
And
You are
5,000
scared.
Jews died
You are
for
scared.
that reason.
You are scared. Talk about
Christians, go and look up
all of them.
the Assyrian massacre of Christians. Go and look up
Talk about Jewish people.
neo-paganism.
Talk about
Go
Jewish people.
and look up
Talk
the
about
Armenian
Jewish people.
genocide.
Talk about Jewish
Go
people.
and look up
Talk about
the
Jewish
massacre of the Greek Christian populace
Talk about
of
Jewish people.
Turkey.
Talk about Jewish people.
You
What they
have
do.
been
What
lied to.
Talk
The
about Jewish
media
people. Hey,
is lying
talk.
to you.
Talk about Jewish
Free
people.
your mind.
Talk about Jewish people.
I'm
Talk.
going to have a cup of tea.
Ah,
I've been here for over an
I
hour.
give you a cup of tea. I give you a cup of tea. But just talk.
I don't agree with everything, but I like his
Talk
zeal.
about Jewish
He's
people.
got some zeal.
Talk about Jewish people. Talk about Jewish people.
Some zeal.
Okay?
No, I'm
Yeah,
preaching
that's what I said. I
history.
don't agree with everything, but
Can you
he's got
condemn
some
Hitler,
zeal.
please? Can you condemn Hitler?
Yes, Hitler was
What
an
you
evil
got to
man.
do, one thing you got to do though, Bob, is preach love. That's it.
Bro, I'm talking
I
about the
don't,
history.
you're talking real, you're keeping it real, but you still got
No,
to.
the thing is,
our brothers, we
we've
have
got
to love them. We have to love them.
we've got to
period.
allow our politics to be informed by our history.
Okay. Okay.
So our politics has to be informed by history, not simply virtue signalling rhetoric.
I hear what you're saying, but Christ overrules
Who did I teach
all.
hate against?
Why don't you talk about what happened in Iraq, Libya?
See, always, I'm talking about what happened. Do you know what happened in Sri Lanka today? Two Muslims no more than two Muslims. Muslims went into 3 churches in Sri Lanka and have killed 207 people today. Do you not think that I have a right to speak against that?
He's upset about because this is.
No, wait, don't let him get off. Answer my question. Do I have a right to speak against Muslims who kill Christians? Yes or no? Right, thank you.
Oh, thanks. No, but he's upset because of the churches today.
Why are you trying to talk about that one thing?
Because it happened today. It's happened today. So you see, like when that happened in New Zealand, yeah, I was raging. You know, on my Facebook. Do you know how many people put candles up? France and all this, everyone does. Only 3 people put it up for New Zealand. 3 people even cared on my whole Facebook. So I was fuming. Do you understand me? Just like he's fuming now because 7 churches have been blown up by Christians. And no one says nothing. No one says nothing. Do you understand me? That's the whole point. So he's hurt because he's zealous. I don't know the guy, but I can see he's zealous. You get me?
Aaron. Good name. Like that, brother. Like that. Cool, No, I need for you to reconcile.
I don't want to be West. Where's Bob gone?
He went to get some tea, I think.
Where's Bob?
He ain't gonna dismiss it. He's gonna ask me how much. Let me handle the situation. This is what I do.
This is what I do. People want to know. I wrote about this. I wrote an article about this morning. When you act like Iowa.
We're not Trinidad. A lot of people converts first one from Trinidad.
No, what we're saying is, I like to teach young people. When you teach young people, it's good to test their ego. The problem with the ego in our young people, there are a lot of them like him. Boy, go and get married. You need, I can tell you need to get married. Ha! With your cowboy hat. Fila in Yoruba. What's the language? What language is it? Very good. We love him highly. Stand by me. Your talk is sound. The man is agreeable. Not, are you agreeable? He's the most agreeable man. He understood Yoruba and he pronounced it. I know. He pronounced it as I do. I said Yoruba. Jollof rice is not from there. Don't let any Nigerian fool you. The word jollof is a Wolof word. Wolof is the national language of content. Help me out. Where is national? Where's the what's the Boy, man, listen, don't make you from yard. You only have to know something about yard, you know. You have to go all over the place, you know. You can't just say, me have to be from yard and you're left with this one. No, sir. Eddie Grant, I wanted to talk about this over there. This is, but maybe this is getting a little too dry. Get it? Dry desertification. See what I did there? You see what I did there? No, you gotta, I brought you as my cheerleader. You gotta be on that ball. You my sidekick. You gotta be on, exactly, he's on the ball. You see what I did there? Maybe this subject is, I can't do it twice. So content. Sound. Garçon. Où t'es où? Bien longtemps pas où? Moi t'es allé Gambia. Attends, mais c'est la première fois que tu l'as 3 semaines qui passent. Ou maïef. Yon Jean là. Qui? Ou maïef. Oui, moi maïef. Attends. Combien de femmes? Non, yon femme. Yon tout seul. Gambia. Yon tout seul. Alhamdulillah. Yon tout seul. Keep it simple. Oui. Keep it simple. Now, why do you leave? Let him not go.
At some point,
shall he go?
I don't want to interrupt you, but
he desires to leave.
But at some point,
do not advertise any product placement.
But can I ask you about the BACT at some point?
The what? Salam alaikum.
The BACT.
If I catch you alienating Maasai from their culture, I will hunt you down.
No change in culture. No change.
Absolutely. That's how we do it. We got to do it like that.
Yes.
This is my worry. Today I was going to talk about this. Of course, there, and bring it to the situation where Islam, they're creating jihadism versus evangelism in Africa. Maybe some of you all here have heard me talk about the Hippo Trench that is being carved across Africa. Basically, the root problem is what these people are discussing, or what David Attenborough has been discussing about global warming in Africa, what we are experiencing at the coal face, leading to conflicts between and farmers. Why does he interrupt? I despaired. We're having a side conversation. Is that the usual thing? I'm going to have a side conversation with you while they have a side conversation. Y'all finish it because you know y'all cut my wisdom.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
So I was going to have a side conversation. No, we're going to take them one side, and you do that, right? And then you come back to me because I need you here with your cowboy hat. Because y'all evangelists with your cowboy hats are the problem. Salva Kiir is wearing a cowboy hat. You're wearing Museveni, the president of Uganda, another dictator, is wearing a cowboy hat. And for a while, that good luck Jonathan, happy to see him go and gone, of Nigeria, was wearing a cowboy hat. And it tells me something. It tells you where you follow the money that's coming to them in return. If you take Uganda, it's meddling in Eastern Congo for coltan, tantalite, uranium, cobalt, all those minerals in Eastern Congo. for which these guys are allowed to stay in power. And part of the transaction is evangelism. That's why they wear these cowboy hats. You see, the money tells you it comes from Texas. I know this is not a Texan that. You're going to interrupt? You're going to interrupt the whole time?
You're making a slight mistake, Sheikh. I don't want you to continue making a mistake.
I know where the hat comes from. I'm using the hat as a term of art to bring it into the conversation.
You're speaking figuratively.
My talk is always like that. I use it as a term of art to bring it in. Hats like that. When you see African leaders wearing hats like that, they have an evangelical agenda. I don't mind that. Believe what you want. But don't be carting off Africa's minerals by the wheelbarrow out of the DRC through Uganda and Rwanda. I'm speaking to Paul Kagame and his wife Janet too. I'm speaking to them at the same time. Carting off the what now? Rwanda is doing okay. Has the largest representation of women in parliament in Africa. So that's a good luck story. It did not come just like that. A lot of money was pumped into Rwanda as a guilt compensation for not having sooner intervened to stop the Rwandese genocide. So all of these things are, you're gonna go sidekick? All right, sidekick. Nice to use your hat. Yeah. Now, that's all I'm trying to say about this thing. When we talk about this, desertification, these things are interlinked. We have exploitative oppressors in our countries ruling for far too long. They're in power for far too long. They're in power because they have been allowed to remain in power at a price. I agree. At an exploitative price. Sometimes we allow it because we have this sense that they're the ones who brought independence. Like Bouteflika. Like Bouteflika. He's gone, he's gone. I saw your flag, I thought I'd bring that up. Just go. But the reason we keep the ANC in power in South Africa, and now we're going to be doing the same damn thing with the group in power in South Sudan, is because we believe we owe them a debt of gratitude for having brought us independence. Man, one thing I like about this country, when they had enough of Winston Churchill, surprisingly, they voted him out. Winston Churchill was voted out. So irrespective of what he did for this country, he wasn't so kind to the people of Bangladesh. But what he did for this country, they decided you're as good as your last fight. Amir Khan knows all about that, right? You're as good as your last fight. And they duly voted Winston Churchill out. We need to do that in Africa because we need leaders who will not take the golden shilling, and we need people. I'm not just talking about Africa here. I'm speaking of anywhere in the developing South. That's what they call us. They used to call us the third world. Now they're calling us the developing South. We need people, leaders, who will be protected by the people so that when another Blaise Compaoré in Burkina Faso tries to assassinate a great leader like Thomas Sankara, the people will stop it. That's what we need. We need people power. And so there's a lot of sense that this young group of people out there are making. The people called, what's they called? Destroy? The name of the group who are against global warming, climate change. I am saying we have to understand. Extinction. We need to understand how much this is going to affect us first. And I'm talking about we from back home, where it's hot. It's going to affect us first. When this turns up a notch, this thing that's giving me so much beautiful vitamin D today, when that turns up a notch, who's going to feel it first? The so-called developing South. The areas where there's desert, like Rajasthan, like the Sahara, are going to dry out faster. the population living there is going to have to do two things. Fall back on fighting with other Africans who have farms, the herders I mean, the people who keep camels, sheep, goats, cattle, or they're going to cross the Mediterranean and come here. And they're going to be joining y'all, chasing the same nickel, fighting over the same 10 people. And they're going to be joining you all, and you all are going to be the first, I'm included, we're going to be the first to blame them for stealing our resources. We're going to be the first to say they jump the queue and get flats, apartments. We are going to be the first to say they get all their children are using the social services. We can't have a GP's appointment because of all these immigrants. That we are going to be the first to say. You know why? They're going to lean on us first. This problem isn't going to rock up on Jacob, the smog. I'm talking about the smog. And I hope the smog can hear me. This isn't going up. This is going to wash up first and foremost on the doorstep of Jacob Rees-Mogg. This ain't going to bother the smog. It's going to come on your door and my door. Necessarily, we are going to hate the so-called refugees and immigrants first. We're going to hate them. They're going to set us to hate them. Notice this. People who are poor hate the destitute. That's what happens. People who are just poor hating people who are very poor. And that's not how it used to be. We remember how we used to live in the old days. We shared what we had. We shared what we had. The world, the capitalist world is not like that any longer. The world is a world, think of the desert. As the desert expands, the population that lives there crowds into smaller and smaller oases. The population that lives in that desert crowd, and they're going to come into conflict with each other. That's what's going to happen. Similarly, as more refugees come to this country, having successfully made it across the Mediterranean. So, are you... I like to keep a serious discussion. You must... Yeah, I don't like calling them refugees. You're asking a question, let me answer. You know why my hands are like this? I do not like those words. I don't think you... I need you all to help me out here because somebody... I need a translation. I need a translation button. I need a translation button. I will put this down because I need my hands. He only saw one, so maybe he thought I did this to him. I was doing this. I don't like the terms. I don't like economic migrants. I don't like... They're human beings. And they deserve respect. And when English doctors, you know, if you go to your GP, you hardly find an English doctor. When they go to Canada and Australia, they're called expats. Oh, the expat doctors from London. They don't call them what they are, they're economic migrants. That's what they are.
Economic migrants.
But because, that's what they are. But because Canada is white and Australia, well, they became white. Canada wasn't always white. No, and neither was Australia. The fact, and because they have a certain standard of living, they don't feel the weight of the English doctors leaning on them, taking away their jobs. And half of them come here for overseas experience anyway. But all of that is a sidebar just to deal with what I thought my brother was coming with. Because I'm not in the mood for foolishness. I don't come here for foolishness. I misunderstood him and he misunderstood me. What I'm here for is, that's why I don't get into debates. Because you're not going to learn anything if there's a debate. It's ego. And I'm too tired. I'm too old for that. I want to discuss what they're doing over there and how it's important to us where we come from. Because the Maldives is going to disappear. And the only people who are going to miss the Maldives are the rich people who go there for their honeymoons. When they stand on the Maldives and it keeps sinking, then they'll get worried. But the people who live in the Maldives have nowhere else to go. That's not where they honeymoon, it's where they live. So, and because I'm a Muslim and they're Muslims, of course I'm going to mention them first. So, it's not just about that, but it's about simply this situation concerns us. It concerns us first and foremost. Most of us seem to come from parts of the world which have already turned desert.
90%.
Yeah, so it does concern us. If people think I'm taking a biased interest, it's a focus. It's not a biased interest. As a Muslim, I will have a predilection for talking about Muslims, but I am not just doing that. There's the Kalahari Desert in the Namib region. It's also a desert. People live there. They're human beings. They are hunter-gatherers. They may have fewer items of clothing on than I am. They are just as human as I, and their survival needs to be guaranteed. We cannot have people just dying because the desert is increasing, the oceans are rising. Lovely to meet you guys. Assalamu alaikum. Lovely to meet you all. We can't just have that. So this is an issue that is as important to us. I don't want to reiterate what I did 2 weeks ago when I talked about the conflict it's causing. It's causing ethnic conflict in parts of Africa between people who herd animals and people whose farms are being encroached upon. As I said before, these are not gentlemen farmers, they are poor peasant farmers. So when they lose crops to an animal, they lose a lot. However, when they kill someone's bull, cattle, animals, one single animal is worth more than its economic value. For herds of people, animals have, the value is transcending this purely material. And that's what I'm trying to say. Why these issues are affecting the African continent in particular, the place I can talk about more than other places, is because you see the sun we're having today, we're enjoying it. But we remembered last year how long summer lasted. It lasted for an inordinate length of time. That tells you something. There are changes which we are not yet able to see because of this green and pleasant land. We won't see them. But the changes are actually taking place, and they will take place in our lifetime, and if not in my lifetime, all of you are going to have grandchildren soon. And it's going to affect our lives. And as I said, when situations become dire, poor people attack poor people first. Those who are poor have become impatient that people who are poorer are demanding from them, because nobody's going to go to Jacob Rees-Mogg and say, hey, have fewer children. But Jacob Rees-Mogg is going to be going around telling you have fewer children. Nobody tell him to do that, but he come tell you that. And he's going to tell you he has the money to afford it. Ask him how he made his money. Ask all of them, all those big companies who some of the Israelis found out have Holocaust money in the Swiss bank, and Tate and Lyle and some of these companies became rich because of colonialism and slavery. All these big companies. So don't let any of them tell you that that money that they made is from their own back-breaking efforts. It's not. It's predicated on wealth that their parents stole in the colonial period, and the nature of capitalism is such that wealth increases. Once you've got it, you can increase it at the expense of the poor. And we who are poor are going to have to cope with the indigent, and the indigent are going to have to cope with the destitute, and we're going to be hating each other and killing each other while the smog is up there sitting pretty with his dynasty of 6 children in what he calls God's own county, Somerset. I think I've exhausted this topic. To continue further would be to go into the realm of, as I could say, diminishing returns. If anybody has any questions on the subject about what's happening over there, they're free to ask me, or better yet, I'm sure there's stuff that I cannot answer because I haven't finished reading the book. You can go across there and ask them questions. But I do believe this is a noble cause. It's worth further investigations. You see all this discussion about religion? Look, I love religion as much as the next man. But you keep talking and talking and becoming more deeply entrenched in your position, sit in your echo chamber and your safe space and keep saying, I have the only truth. And then you meet out here and argue and nothing gets solved. We don't advance the argument. I will not become a Christian listening to an evangelist rant at me. He won't become a Muslim if I keep ranting at him. And in the meantime, those people sitting in the police van are kind of laughing their heads off if they knew why they were here. They were here precisely to allow us this amount of latitude so we'll go home and not wear gilet jaune. We won't come back tomorrow wearing gilet jaune, yellow vests. We won't do that. That's what... Now, I'm not pissing on speakers, Governor. I'm not doing that. And I'm not saying that because I have a vet. Nobody pays me to come here. I am saying that, yes, it's good for humans, and the British Empire has had a long, tried and tested history of knowing how to allow people to let off steam. And this place has been crafted for you and me to let off steam. And I am aware of that. In some sense, I am a part of the problem, but I think it's something you call weapons of the weak. Weapons of the weak are what the disempowered uses in a situation of futility to secure its freedom.
Chef, can I ask you a question?
Now,
you know when you said that refugees are a problem?
I want you to quote me correctly. That is, I know that's a soundbite, but I didn't say that.
No, I meant like we could say that refugees will be a problem. But you do know that in the UK, 81% of the ethnic population is white, and the rest is immigrants.
How many of those ethnic population work in the National Health Service? How many of them are represented working in the National Health Service?
81% white.
Yeah. Go to the hospital right now. Break your leg and go there now.
No, but there are very few, but there's more of them than us. So we don't really provide a competition against them because they're the majority.
Okay, I'm with you. 100%.
They're the majority at the end of the day.
100%.
France has more ethnic immigrants than the UK.
But let's not compare as if we are better or worse. I know what you're saying. It's like when some people say, you know, our situation is better or worse. I like the gilet jaune thing. I like it because one thing about the French, they don't mess about. They don't. And look, I'm an old man now. I'm about the evolution. You're young. I want you to be about the revolution. I'll repeat that. We need both. We need the David Attenborough. He's about the evolution. He's going to lean on the system. He'll be moderate. He'll be considered. He'll be calm. He'll be balanced. But he'll get his point across by degrees. He's speaking to a constituency that would not listen to you or to you or to you. But I also need you and you, because there are people here who won't listen to, and the slow lemur that lives in Madagascar is in danger. There are not a lot of people here who won't listen to y'all. But you people here have a constituency. And the Gilets jaunes have a purpose. They wouldn't have been there. Malcolm X would not have existed had the situation not called for a Malcolm X. When I hear stupid people say things like, oh, he spoiled Martin Luther King's revolution, I say, no. They listened to Martin Luther King because of Malcolm X. They were so terrified that he was going to bring the pain. They said, let's listen to the good cop. He's bad cop. And that's what they'll play with you all tonight. So I'm asking you all, don't get emotional here tonight. I know the weather's warm and people get a little touchy. And people are going to troll you. And people are going to heckle and harangue in the crowd. Do not rise, especially when it starts getting dark. Do not get violent. Do not get out of control. We need to move as one. We're not one, but we need to move as one. We're not one, people. I'm not ignorant. I know this. The women here have issues with us as men that I wouldn't understand, and I need to hear from them. The working class here have issues that the rich people walking around here on holiday would not understand, and they gotta listen to them. So we have all kinds of intersectionality standing right here today. All of these voices need to be heard. But what I am saying that people need to do, I'm not saying to be calm and be supine. I'm saying be calm and be still revolutionary, not supine. The thing you should not do is just let people drive over you and tell you that the right way to protest is how they tell you. That's because they want you to do what I'm doing now. Let off steam and go home and feel good about yourself. No, that's not enough. This is just a beginning. And I hope, as the beginning of a baton race, a relay race, I am metaphorically passing this on to somebody else who can take it up. Because I can't do it. I suffer from arthritis. I can't do this. I can't run the whole race. But I know there are young people there like you who understand what I'm saying and will not, as a Muslim like myself, you're not going to make your religion into the only thing you're going to fight for, because you know there are people who are going to take that and divert the revolution somewhere else. And you know that class struggle is not the only thing to fight for, because there are going to be people who are going to take that and divert it somewhere else. And veganism is not the only thing to fight for, because there are people who are going to take it. All revolutions are I'm making up a word now, corruptible. I was going to say subvertible. Corruptible. However, what you need to do is look at the merits of all these revolutions I talk about. Feminism, veganism, Islam, class struggle. Look at all these revolutions and be on your guard that there's nobody who is going to corrupt them, because all systems are corruptible as long as humans. And I say this to my Muslim brothers, they want to know why I'm not down 100%, always talking every week about Islam. I tell you why. I state my case plainly. Human beings want anything. If I read this book, which is not the Quran al-Kareem, it's just this book. The moment I interpret it, that's my interpretation of what I've read, based on who I am and what I know so far in life. I may come back to this book in 20 years' time and have a complete reappraisal of said book. And that's what I'm trying to say to people. Why I do not making more sense than I am, right? He's actually agreeing with me. He's saying, preach, brother. Now, I am thinking simply this. I want us to constantly be ombudsmen for whatever revolution we're in. Whatever you're in feminism, question your feminism all the time. Don't let anybody come and say, you know, we're all sisters, because you got exploitative people, middle class people who will do that to you. Right?
Oh, what a joke. All these people dressing up in fancy clothes.
He was talking more sense than you. No, wait a minute. He's talking more sense than you.
It's not a fancy
more
dress,
sense than you. Yo, dog.
It's not a fancy dress.
I don't know which is the dog. That's a yo dog.
Here we're here to be serious.
Yo, dog.
About
He making more sense than you.
through our Lord Jesus
Slavation. Salvation or slavation? Switch the letters around. Salvation, slavation.
Only the blood of Christ
Slavation, salvation. He come to bring salvation. Look at him.
Through the blood of Jesus
You know what
Christ.
embarrasses me?
Yeah.
As a man from the
Jesus
colonies,
said we're
this
all
embarrasses me.
brethren,
Look at
and
me.
he is our one
Look at me.
master.
That's
So
embarrassing.
we're all brethren. No
This is
slavery.
embarrassing.
No slavery.
Slavation.
We're all brethren. One is our master.
Slavation.
Even Christ.
Switch the letters around.
That's why we're here
Salvation,
today.
slavation.
Not to be dressed up in fancy dress.
That's
not to look
fancy
like
dress.
clowns.
Look at the weather.
We're here
Look at the weather. Who's
on
wearing fancy
serious
dress?
business.
In this heat,
And
who's
the
wearing fancy
salvation
dress?
of men's souls
Exactly. People,
are at
in
stake.
this heat,
And there's
who's
only
wearing
one
fancy
Savior
dress?
of sinners. That's
Your
why
dog,
Jesus
your
Christ
dog is
shed
more
his
sensible than
own
you.
blood. for the
Your dog,
remission of
listen,
sin.
that's right, go on.
And
Speak.
that's why we
Speak.
have.
Speak.
You know,
He's making more
Allah
the
couldn't
dog.
speak to
The dog
Muhammad
is making more
because there was
sense.
a dog under the
You see
bed.
how they come and spoil
And
stuff?
they represent
You see what
Allah.
they do?
And so
You see
Allah
what they
can't
do?
speak when there's a
You
dog
see what
here.
they do? The
That's why he's not
dog.
speaking.
The dog is making
That's
more
why he's
sense
not
than you.
speaking anymore.
The dog has more sense.
Because Allah can't speak
The
when
dog
there was a
had more
dog
sense.
under the bed.
The dog
Read
had more
your
sense.
Quran and you'll see
The
it's
dog made
true.
more sense.
What nonsense.
Take your master with
What a
you.
nonsense
Take your
religion.
master with you. Don't make me start on you. Don't start. Don't make me start on you. Slavation. Salvation or slavation. He said he's an Edomite. He said he's an Edomite. Edom. He told me last week he's an Edomite. Edom. He
I said
dumb.
Idum.
He dumb. He dumb.
I'm from Idumea.
He dumb.
I-D-U, and he spelled it
Go with
E-D-O-M.
him. Go
like
with
I
him.
said last week, this man is unintelligent.
Content
and he talks to those that are
over
impressionable,
everything.
that have no knowledge.
Delete.
Never trust a man that dyes his beard
You're
orange.
wasting time. Follow your master.
You need to
Slavation. That is salvation. Slavation. That's not salvation. Slavation. Follow your master.
Do not
follow your master.
Intelligent
Drink your water. Give him some water. Give him some water.
Does anybody want intelligent conversation?
Yeah, okay. Now, I'm sorry for that bit of inspired lunacy behind us, but every now and then the passing cabaret stops for a pause and they underestimate their opposition. I have met with them before. All I want to say to people is this. Every revolution has the ability to devour its own children. I want people to be aware of this. I am for the revolution. I am too old, so I am doing the evolution. I am doing the evolution. But I support revolution. However, what I'm saying to revolutionaries, having been involved on a micro level, is revolutions. I'm being a little bit confused by the noise. Revolutions have the potential to devour their own children. I saw it in Zimbabwe with Robert Mugabe. He came to power in 1980, and as soon as he came to power, they had the problems between the Shona and the Matabele and Joshua Nkomo versus Robert Mugabe. We know how that turned out. In Iran, in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini came to power. No sooner as he ascended to power, it was a conflict between Abul Hassan Bani Sadr and Ayatollah Khomeini. Revolutions do have a tendency and ability. So I'm saying to you all here, be revolutionary. But I'm going to tell you something. If you are close to a revolutionary and he's just Red El Principe, he might adopt the maxim that goes like this. Whenever a group of people have caused you to ascend to power, the first people you move against are those people. For the people who can put you in power, likewise are the people who can remove you from power. So what dictators tend to do? Dictators who ride revolutions. As soon as they ascend to power, they start liquidating the people closest to them. And I have seen and met with and discussed with so many disenchanted, disillusioned former revolutionaries who were so optimistic about the future of their country when they took power. When they put a particular person in power. A very good example of which would be Eritrea. When after so many years, I'm calling countries that perhaps some people have not heard about, Eritrea is just north by east of Ethiopia. It was a former province. Even to say that is debatable because the Eritreans will never accept that they once were a province of the imperial state of Ethiopia. So I leave that for people to argue about. That said, when Eritrea secured its independence under Isaias Afwerki, well, Afwerki, that was since the 1990s. Afwerki is still in power. And a large number of the people being abused today in Libya, sodomized, brutalized, and maltreated, I heard say sold. I have even heard sold as slaves or for temporary cheap labor. I don't want to dispute that, but I don't want to discount it. What I'm saying is they are running from the same country, Eritrea, once a beacon, like today, Rwanda is a beacon of hope for independent new countries in Africa. So I know there are revolutions that start with all good hope, optimism and ambition, and no sooner they end up becoming the thing they sought to remove. And that is why we need to constantly be vigilant about our revolutions becoming exactly the thing we sought to remove. I think I've exhausted this subject. If anybody has any questions, I can only talk about, with some degree, some modicum of knowledge of parts of Africa, the ones I have quoted, because I have some travel in some of these countries, but I can't talk about Cambodia and Pol Pot. I don't have that much information on that situation. I don't have enough information on what Canada is doing to its Mohawks, the ethnic group that has only recently been given Canadian citizenship in their own country. I don't have enough information on how Australia is treating its indigenous First Peoples, whom we call Aborigines, but I advise everyone here to go away and research how these people are being treated. The Aborigines, again, I'm doing that because I don't like calling people names that they don't like. In particular, are living in the desert. Australia is a continent which is predominantly desert, and just as we're discussing global warming and the overheating of the surface of the earth, so too we have to wonder at the outcome for the Australian First Peoples. So I think all of these things are important, and I think we have to step outside of our religious affiliation, step outside of our racial affiliation, step outside of our class affiliation, step outside of our gender affiliations to see if there is merit in any argument that is proposed by the other side. I'm not going to tell you whom to listen to on the radio, but there are counter-revolutionary people I listen to understand their argument, because I want to know the kind of lies that they're telling us. You've got to listen to them. I'm not saying be taken in. Mind they don't take you in. And I'm sure the people who bother to stand around here will not be taken in by such people. But listen to them to see how they craft their argument and see how they fool people. Listen to the people calling in. And listen to the masses of listen to them who get fooled by these people. And so my view of life is that you have to have a position, but always be prepared. No sacred cows. No question what's going on, because like I said, once any dogma, any ideology, any position is interpreted by humankind, there's a woman here, so I can't interpreted by man, by humankind, it becomes, it's not a hard science anymore. It's not what it was. The minute you interpret something, it becomes something that is viewed through the prism of your experience. And I think I want to stop here because I'm like when you're coming to
Thank you, man.
Thank you. That's all right. That's cool, man. Y'all keep doing what y'all doing. Yes, sir. So thank you all for your kind attention. I saw somebody I felt like trolling, but I don't want to further mess. We've had enough fun. We've had enough levity. Yeah. So I see somebody over there I should troll, but I think I won't. I don't know where is the man in charge of this. I need to tell him to come take his certainly. I didn't write this, I have to confess. I'm still finished reading it. Not at all. So that is all I have to say on that subject. If people want me to bring up a different subject, other than that, I can do it. Anyhow, so far, thank you all for your kind attention. Content over everything is trying his best to do very sterling work here to separate the truth from the falsehood, and I commend this station to everybody out there. Listen to it. Content over everything. Thank you all for your kind attention.
That's where God's justice was poured out in full when Jesus Christ was on the cross of Calvary, when he was suffering all the righteous anger of the Holy God against sin. That is why it was necessary for Jesus Christ to die. It was absolutely essential for Jesus Christ to give his life in the place of sinners. Otherwise there would be no forgiveness of sin. And Jesus Christ has paid the penalty to the justice of an infinitely holy God. And only he could do it because he is from eternity. That's why he's the goal of life, finding common ground. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. And then he told us that he and God the Father are one God, not two gods, not three gods. God the Father and God the Son are one God. He says no man is able to pluck my sheep, my believing people, out of my Father's hand.
Same thing as well. They spoke to none of the brothers for a while, man.
How the state of nature was conceived. So Thomas Hobbes, we saw that human beings are evil by nature. He said that they're evil by nature. And John Locke, on the other hand, he said that we've got human beings that in the state of nature, that all of them are kind of fighting with each other and like warriors in the jungle, like, yeah? And that they have to give up parts of their freedom to the sovereign. It's not only for that sovereign to then protect
Because he's shared his own transition from all the remission of sin. That's
to a social contract is more my question to you is what do you then have to be? For example, if you have a state of nature and you don't have a social contract, this is my question. If you have a state of nature and you don't have a transition,
that's one of the important things that I need.
James, you have to allow it to be.
That's one question.
Okay, so my turn. James, let's keep it pleasant because otherwise we're just talking over each other.
Okay, I didn't try and interrupt you.
So here I agree with a lot of what you read out there. Basically, it was amazing how it actually represents. If you go and if people rewind what I said and listen to what you said, they'll find that about 80% of what I said was within what you read, right? The state of nature and all that kind of thing. I mean, you're actually validating what I'm saying, right? You are. Now, the point is that I made, and if you look back on the video footage, you'll hear me saying this again, is that the standard understanding of liberal theory is that you start with a state of nature, and then there's a transaction that's made, usually referred to as a social contract, and that gives legitimacy to the sovereign, right? That is what Rousseau said, that is what Locke said, that is what Thomas Hobbes said. Now, if you don't have that social contract, then the sovereign doesn't have legitimacy to mandate. The a priori assumption that you mentioned, I didn't disagree with that. Locke said that himself. He said that there's only one or two things, literally, that you can have a right to protect. One of them was property. So he had that a priori assumption himself, right? Which is the a priori assumption of freedom in the first instance. Now, the reason why I was making this point to you, and this is just to cut to the chase, because there's a lot of technicalities here, and a lot of people will be lost, right? You agree and I agree that, liberalism is more than just John Locke and John Stuart Mill and Rousseau and all those names I mentioned. I use them as additional evidence, as supplementary evidence. I can't stand here and start mentioning 30 or 40 names. Impossible, right? It's not an essay I'm writing, it's a conversation I'm having. Okay, now that's point number one. Number two is, the point I'm making is that there's a similarity. This is my main argument. The reason why we had this discussion in the first place is to show you that the dominant ethic here in the West, which is liberalism, and social liberalism in particular, there is conceivable within the framework of social liberalism that you can have, situations whereby, for example, slavery can exist, you can have situations unlegitimized through the social contract, you can have situations where, for example, the death penalty can be given, in certain contexts, treason laws can be put in place, which, by the way, I'm saying are, for all intents and purposes, the same kind of laws that you criticize regularly as a Western liberal, not yourself, but maybe you. I don't watch your videos. I watch the ones that me and you are in. Yeah? So, I'm not. Right. So, just to review. But what I'm saying is, it's as conceivable for a liberal social contract understanding, a contractarian understanding, that those laws, which are like, for example, death penalty for non-allegiance to a state, even cutting hands off amputation. I mean, it's not inconceivable that a liberal state can allow that within its paradigm, just as it's not inconceivable within Islamic state the same thing can be allowed. The reason why I'm bringing this to your attention is to let you know that what you have to offer me is basically nothing, right? When liberals and people from the West tell Muslims that you have to modernize, my argument to you is, for the sake of argument, let's say we're going to modernize, right? Let's go with it. Now, let's say we become liberal and we're completely changed. And by the way, most of the Muslim countries are
getting started now. Joe Rizzo is over there sitting down.
But let's say for the sake of argument, we go with that model. My point is, what really is going to change? A dictator, or let's just say a sovereign, or a leader of some sort, if he seizes that power, he can decide to have Sharia law, right? Literally all the punitive laws of Sharia law within a liberal framework, and that can be legitimized through the social contract. That's my argument. So what I'm saying is, you basically have nothing to offer me, right? And you can't say on liberalism, this is my argument, secondary point, you cannot say on liberalism, you can't have a sanctum of liberalism. You can't say, well, cutting the hand off the thief is wrong. Or, for example, the punishment of death penalty is wrong. Because why? It's conceivable through your system as well. That's what it is. So my argument is, you have nothing to offer us, and what you're criticizing as of, in principle, is possibly in a liberal state. That's my argument. And unless you can unlock those principles and say that contract theory doesn't exist, then that's going to be a checkmate and a final bottom line, really, I feel.
Okay. I'm glad that you tried to make that argument. Going back to just the one that we finished with.
Ask IC3, I beg you ask him to do a little wrap-up thing, just for the camera, but keep going, just for the camera.
With often contradictory ideas between one liberal philosopher and another liberal philosopher, it is therefore invalid for you to have said, as you did in your video, that one of the fundamental pillars, one of the pillars of liberalism is what you represented of the social contract theory. Because for one thing, the social contract theory that you represented was just John Locke's. Like your social contract. Well, no, because Rousseau's social contract theory would be very different to what you represented. Because, for example, why? Because you said that one of the things that social contract theory couldn't be used to justify violating would be property rights, whereas Rousseau would totally disagree.
Okay, right. I'm saying more rights are taken away.
So you need to.
That's a minor point.
Well, no, it isn't. No, it's an important point because people are going to come away with this idea of like, liberalism, it's so monolithic, it's so simple.
Alright, so I think you've done a good job, and we've shown the people that it's not monolithic. We accept that liberalism is a broad, where lots of Japanese people were killed and others were threatened to kill. If you add to that citizen Americans who have been killed because of their perceived non-allegiance to that state, like Abdul Rahman